Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome on behalf of Dallas College and the sustainability team to our weekly Sustainable You. I'm Lori De La Cruz Lewis, and I'm joined by our team members, Georgianne Moss and our Dallas College WebEx support team, who are all working in the background to make sure that this program happens. So, without further ado, I'd like to introduce our speakers for today. We have two. The first up is Gary Cocke, who has led the Office of Sustainability at UT Dallas since 2018, with previous sustainability experience in higher education and municipal government. He is responsible for facilitating the integration of sustainability into campus stewardship, student life, administration, and student learning. UTD, as well as universities across the nation and the world, tracks the effectiveness of sustainability programs according to the Sustainability Tracking, Assessment, and Rating System, which is also called the STARS report, and it is administered by the Association for the Advancement of Sustainability in Higher Education, or also known as ASHE. So Gary is our first speaker. Our second speaker today is Richard Johnson, and he is the Executive Director for Sustainability at Rice University. He manages the Administrative Center for Sustainability and Energy Management at Rice. In this role, he leads their sustainability program and also oversees a team of energy managers and analysts. Richard serves as the co-chair of the Texas Regional Alliance for Campus Sustainability, also called TRACS, because we're really big on acronyms if you haven't been able to notice that, and as the chair of the Futures Council at the College of Architecture, Planning, and Landscape Architecture of the University of Arizona. So again, welcome, and please, Gary, show is all yours.
Lori, pleasure to be here with you. So today, what I'm going to be covering is some of the proactive things that we do at UT Dallas to make sure that we are doing everything we can to reduce the amount of waste that we create, to prioritize reuse where we can, and then recycle. And so I've put here that we aim to reduce, reuse, and recycle in that order. And what we're looking at here is the Sustainable Development Goals, which essentially give the scope of work that we have as sustainability professionals. But you can see that I've put a box around Sustainable Development Goal number 12, responsible consumption and production. So based on campus, it is very important because first and foremost, it is one of the things that we know every member of our community will interact with. So regardless of a student's academic interest, their major on campus, or their interest in digging deep into the academic components of sustainability, we know that they will need to dispose of this. And so this provides us an opportunity to model appropriate practices and to educate our community. So important because you can see that these Sustainable Development Goals, each one that is by design. And so although we're going to be speaking about one of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, we're effectively doing is we are impacting all community and then also impacting various other areas of sustainability. What we're going to do is we're going to first do some level setting, and I will speak a little bit about our waste management at UTD. We'll take a deeper dive, and then we're going to talk about some things that we're doing. There are all the items that they can't be composted, they can't be recycled, and they can't be eliminated. And so we're going to kind of invert the waste management hierarchy that you can see on the left-hand side provided by the EPA. We're going to start off with what we are doing to be more efficient in our management of our. We're going to then talk about some of the practices that we have to go above and beyond with our recycling program. We will then speak a little bit about our composting program and the lessons learned there, and then talk about ongoing efforts to address single-use plastic. So to level set with regards to our campus, we do contract with the company Waste Management, or WM, for our campus trash and recycling service. The way that our waste moves on campus, we have collection containers in all of our buildings and in offices that are filled during the daytime whenever our students, faculty, and staff are on campus. We have custodial contractors that come when our buildings are less occupied. Points of disposal where we are disposing of recycling, and we use clear bags for our trash. And I will flag that that is an important part of what we do, so that we can make sure that we are managing streams appropriately. I'll note also that that was something that we had to justify to Waste Management when we were going out to RFP for our waste services, because especially in recycling, they do not want for us to effectively manage our waste. We were able to integrate the blue bags into our contract so that we can keep rated the way that we want. The custodians collect the trash from our buildings. They place the bags onto the service bays of the buildings. And in the morning, when our full-time UTD management staff arrive to campus, they collect the trucks and they move them to 8-yard containers, 30-yard containers, or compactors. And I'm going to dive in a bit more is how we're able to manage it more effectively when we get it into those 8-yard containers. Because what we have been doing, what I assume many of you are doing, is that you have a schedule so that you do not ever have any waste overflowing from your bins. And that's what we did. And we also had in our contract that we were going to depend on our waste hauler to identify ways that we could be more efficient with our service. But we haven't really hit that mark yet. And so what I'm going to dive into is how we are working towards a more efficient practice. And just so you know, as we talk about the scale of our waste on campus, we about in the neighborhood of 4 million pounds of landfill and about 2.5 million pounds of recycling per year on a non-pandemic year. We yard containers on campus for compactors and for 30-yard open tops. So as I mentioned in the previous slide, the issue that we were running up against is that because we estimated our service schedules, we were over-servicing our containers. And we knew that an outcome from that is there are unnecessary disruptions to our campus. If you think about the college campus environment, we have a student community of 30,000. And oftentimes the morning time when our waste hauler is collecting are some of the busiest times for pedestrian traffic as well. So each time we have unnecessary service, we're disrupting that traffic. We are adding a point source of pollution affecting air quality. We're wasting money. We're adding to carbon footprint. And we are creating unnecessary work both for staff and for contractors. And so as I've been discussing this issue, I was made aware that there are sensors that can help to right size our campus service. And so I worked with a consultant, and the consultant provided analysis comparing two sensor brands, the first of which was Sensineo, and the second one that I looked at was Compology. I've subsequently become aware that there is a third sensor. The sensors provide real-time data. They all provide reports. They all provide you with the ability to measure and have the visibility needed to manage your waste. Selected Sensoneo simply because the price point was the best and most competitive. And I will add that it had more a narrow function, which actually fit what we needed more. Compology, in addition to just telling you the fill level and the times of service that that your bins were tipped, the Compology would also give you pictures so that you could see what the composition of each of your containers was at the time of service, so that you can also monitor your right, UT Dallas. And so we selected Cincinnati really based on price point. As we decided we wanted to move forward with Cincinnati, we did a pilot study. And so we installed 5 of the sensors into 5 of our containers. On the right-hand side of the screen, you should be seeing one of our 8-yard containers. You have circled in red. It's probably very hard to see from this picture, but what I've circled is the small sensor that is mounted to the container itself. It is a small battery operated, a traditional, I think it's a AA battery. Mounts there. Our staff was able to install with no trouble. It communicates via a cellular network, and so no serious IT infrastructure whatsoever was required, and it required 2 penetrations to our 8-yard containers to mount. So what we got with our 5 sensor pilot was the ability to try it before you buy it, and we board from which we are able to look at the data in real time from our units. And this is a screen capture, which I'll quickly orient you on. I actually grabbed this morning. And so you can see on the left-hand side, we have a map of our campus. We have some red dots and we have some green dots. Those dots are the location at which we have our containers placed. Color coding is specific to thresholds which we set. And so you can set these thresholds. They are customizable. Essentially, green means good. Yellow means start looking at service. Red means we're past the point where we want to set service. So you can set those thresholds where you like them according to your operation. And then on the right-hand side, you can see in real time what the levels are for each unit. So you can see we have one unit that is at the top that is saying 99% full. It is time for us to get service to that container, and we may want to dig deeper about if we have missed a service or if there was an event that we did not account for. You can see that we have 3 containers that in the green, so they're showing good. They've likely received service recently. And then we have another one that's at 82%. So again, we are ready to get that service there. It gives the prediction for when we expect the next service. So in that column there, you can see that we know what to expect, and we know if we need to adjust from our expectations. So up at the top, you can see we have a tab that whenever I am working through the actual web-based dashboard, we can go to our reports, and you can look at the data any which way that you wish to analyze it. You can pull up a container. You can look at its fill level at time of service over the past 3 months. You can look at averages for all containers. You can slice it and dice it any way that's most useful for you. It's really helpful in gaining a lot of insights. And then we have the ability to make adjustments to how we have things arranged within this dashboard ourselves. Truth be told, I prefer to have Cincinnati help me with that. And so they've been really helpful so far in helping us to get everything set up so that we are effectively using this tool. I will add that this is the PC dashboard. It also has a mobile app, so our staff that are in the field are able to, again, in real time at the location where they need the data, look at real time data. So what have we learned from this? So first, I'm going to start off with the infographic on the right hand of the screen. We did this pilot project for 8 weeks, and we found a lot of use from the data provided. We saw that 18% of the collections which we pay for are simply not provided. And to dial into that, we're fairly confident in that number too, because there are two ways in which the sensor senses the fill level and whether or not a service has been provided. So the fill level is actually is an ultrasonic wave, and so it tells you the depth at which the waste is filling the container. And then with regards to sensing a tip, it has a kind of I can tell whether or not it's actually been physically moved. And then it has also the ability to tell if the volume of the trash has been significantly reduced. And so in order for it to show up as a missed collection, it needs to have both of those parameters for sensing whether or not service has been provided. So that in and of itself, 18% of what we are paying for, we simply are not receiving. We've found that service that we do receive, our average fill level is 62%. So quite a bit of room for efficiency there with regards to just making sure that we are only servicing when actually needed. Able to dial into our diversion rate too, because with the fill level at time of service for trash and recycling containers, rather than working from assumptions and estimations, we are able to work from data to determine our actual diversion rate. We also provided some data to the sensor provider and learned that based on what we pay for our service, a monthly ROI per container was estimated at $266 per container per month. I will add, we have not made service adjustments yet, and I'll get into why here in a bit. So we have not realized these ROIs yet, and I won't necessarily stand behind the numbers provided by our sensor provider. I trust that they are accurate. I just have not checked them. With regards to what we can stand behind, here's what we learned from doing this pilot at UTD. First, the sensors were easy to install and to manage. It's 2 penetrations to the container. Our staff were able to do that with no problem. We did get guidance and instructions from the sensors, from the sensor provider. And we did get permission to do this in the containers that were provided by Waste Management. So I'll make that note. Anybody that is looking to alter containers that you don't own, I would really recommend that you get permission to do it from your servicer, and also they can make sure that they don't take that container away, move it across town, and now you're a place that you don't care about. Dashboard and the app provide utility for our staff. So it's beyond just an administrative data point for us. The staff actually appreciate being able to see in real time where they need to prioritize their attention in their work. the data in the dashboard matches what we are hearing from our staff in the field, so they are accurate. The biggest concern I had is it's rough business to be a sensor inside of an 8-yard container that gets tipped into a truck regularly. And so the biggest skepticism that I had was if they would stand up to the wear and tear. And the good news is that they did. We did not have issues with wear and tear, with sensors breaking, with them falling off. There were no issues with batteries and no issues with communications. We did even intentionally put at one end of campus and another end of campus, and then we even put one inside of a parking structure to just make sure that there wasn't going to be issues with the network connectivity to get us the data. We did not observe any issues there. And then the reports are very insightful. So as many all are probably dealing with the same thing, we were flying blind. And so now that we have data, we will be able to adjust our service levels, and we can also hold our contractors accountable to the expectations that we have for the service. We are currently in process of deploying these sensors into every one of our 8-yard containers right now. I will note that the sensors can also be deployed into 30-yard open tops, and they have a different sensor that can be used for compactors that are, I believe, rather than an ultrasound or ultrasonic sensor, it is based on the pressure at which it's compacting. And then the thing that we will be thoughtful with as we move forward is we are grateful for the partnership that we've had with Waste Management in this pilot and the permission that we've received to mount these sensors and proactively manage our waste. And the data that we have, we will seek to adjust schedules and discuss service issues in the future. And we'll just make sure that we do that in a way that's respectful of the partnership that we have with our waste hauler. With that, I know that there will be an opportunity for questions. I have a feeling that there will be some questions related to this because I know from conversations that I've had that all of us probably are dealing with these same issues. So I'll look forward to those questions, which I believe will be at the end of our presentations. But what I wanted to do is also speak to the other proactive things that we do. And so the next topic that I wanted to speak to a bit is our specialty recycling program. And so I'll start off by saying we have the same single stream blue bin recycling as what most people are accustomed to. And then what we've tried to do on campus is if it is recyclable, but not acceptable in a blue bin, we try to offer it to our community free of charge. And we have put in the infrastructure to do that to a significant degree. And then we also have a specialty recycling locator tool, which we communicate with our campus. And so what you're seeing is a screen capture, and I went ahead and pulled down the menu so you can see the items that we do collect. We have battery collection at 69 locations, and that is open to students, faculty, and staff. It's open for university battery recycling and for personal battery recycling as well. That is managed through our environmental health and safety group, and we have the containers that are there for collection at any time, and then as those containers are full, there's a form that our staff can fill out, and the environmental safety group will come and collect. We also have 2 world wear bins, which I'm sure many of you have seen. They've become very prominent at a lot of elementary schools, high schools, and things like that. It's actually a really good on campus. So the way that that works is for clothing, shoes, and even things like stuffed animals, small toys, things like that, World Wear will provide the bins free of charge. The bins have a sensor similar to what we have talked about for our 8-yard containers. They automatically signal WorldWare when they're full. WorldWare provides the service monthly at minimum, and they also cut us a check. And so we receive a rate per pound that we divert. We put these collection points in our residence halls area. We see a lot of utilization from students, especially move out time. And then we use the revenue that we generate from those to fund a scholarship. So it's really an easy win of a program, offers a lot of added value for recycling items that are sometimes difficult to recycle, and contributes to student education. So we've really been pleased with that partnership. The note that I will give to anybody that is interested there is just simply, if you have high volume times like student move out from our campus, or if you have an analogous type of situation where you're going to have a high volume, I would recommend just touching base with WorldWare to let them know that that's coming, and they can provide that service quicker if they expect it. We have a process for recycling laboratory glass, which is a special situation for us because it requires a specific rinsing, triple rinsing, in order for the glass to be recycled. So we're happy to go a step above and beyond there. We also have engaged a subcontractor from Waste Management, and we have a technology bar where students can get help with all of their IT issues, and that is our central location for electronic waste recycling. We provide that free of charge to our students. That's a bill that I pay, or the Office of Sustainability pays, and is a fee that we pay depending on the items recycled. So different items either generate revenue or have a cost depending on what they are and how valuable they are to the recycler. But at the end of the day, I don't want our community to send something to a landfill because there is a cost burden to them to do the right thing. So we manage and provide the funding to cover the costs. And finally, we have plastic film recycling all over our campus. One thing that is big for us that if you are in higher ed, you may want to look at is we've transitioned our labs to having a lab coat vending machine that gives you your lab coats before you go into your chemistry or biology or whatever lab it might be. And they get a fresh lab coat each time. Each time it has a plastic film wrapper around it, and it generates a tremendous amount of plastic waste. And until I am able to get that completely mitigated, at least we recycle it. And so if you are in a similar situation, we use Trex. We collect our plastic film. We take it to a place that sends it to Trex with volume. And we've recycled thousands of pounds of plastic film to date. And then finally, we collect printers all over printer cartridges all over campus and recycle that. Next topic that I'm going to speak to, and I'm going to go a little quickly because I want to make sure I leave Richard plenty of time for his content. But I do believe we have some lessons to share with regards to food waste and composting. So on the left-hand side, what I'm displaying is the EPA food recovery hierarchy. And so you can see that really many people think of composting as the solution to food waste, whereas it's really more preferred to sending to the landfill. But there are things that are much better at the environmental impact from food waste. And so we try to address all levels of the food recovery hierarchy. With regards to source reduction, we have a contract food service provider that is very thoughtful with right sizing the food that we order so that we don't waste. They are obviously financially incentivized to do that because food waste is also going to affect their bottom line. We have conducted food waste audits. And so what you do there is you will set up a station with buckets and you will collect the waste that is being disposed of at the end of dining. You will see what things are most being wasted by students, and you can make menu adjustments from that so that you aren't serving mashed potatoes that nobody likes. And so we've been able to gain insights there. And then with regards to our food prep, For each shift, our service staff has waste not, want not buckets. And so all food waste should go into those waste not, want not buckets. And then that has also informed our staff so that, we can use vegetable cuttings for broths and find ways to continue to mitigate the waste. From there, feeding hungry people is if you're going to have extra food, the next best thing you can do for the environment is to make sure it goes to good use. And so we do have a student-run food recovery network. At the end of each day, they collect leftover food, and they partner with Hope's Door, and we share it with our community. It's a great program. Students run it. It's turnkey for us. Food Recovery Network is a great national organization that you may look to partner with. And then finally, with regards to composting, I'll dial into it, but we compost our landscape waste, our dining hall waste, and our residential waste. The contractor that we partner with actually, they compost all of our waste, but as a national brand, they use some of it in other locations to feed animals and for energy recovery. Briefly, our food waste and composting. We use currently called organics. They provide that service 2 times per week. We use compostable liners everywhere that we collect food waste. I do not want to be the person that accidentally introduces pests to anywhere on campus. So the compostable compostable liners are great for making sure that it is a nice and clean process. And then we've done the funding for this various ways. I'm one of the few people that wanted to fund this because I wanted to make sure that we had accountability centralized so that we could make sure we get the service that we want. I'll note that we use organics currently. There are other composters if you're in the DFW area. We are currently evaluating if organics or perhaps Turn will be the service provider going forward. But either way, many people are under the impression that you need to be able to manage the compost yourself. There are servicers that can do that now. Our dining hall composting is very easy. On the right-hand side, you can see how it looks to students. And so I'm sorry it's not the best picture, but the way it works is our dining hall is a 3-star Green Restaurant certified facility. We have eliminated plastic and all of the things that you would consider contamination to compost. And so that bin that you see has a compostable liner. That is our compost disposal, and it is the only disposal container we have in the facility. Everything in our dining hall that serves several million meals per year is able to be accepted into composting, and therefore we don't need to put out trash or recycling. And so that's how we currently have it. It did take us a little bit of time to get to that point. We began with pre-consumer food waste composting. That was easier to control because oftentimes if you can't control the plastics and the things that are contamination, then I don't believe, especially at the volume that we operate at, that we would be able to effectively communicate and educate such that none of the plastic wrappers become compost, which nobody wants plastic in their soil amendment. So what we did is we started with pre-consumer food waste. We could control that more. We eliminated the contamination in the post-consumer areas. Once that was gone, then we provided compost disposal as the only option because everything was compostable. We're expecting to compost 250,000 pounds of food waste this year. Residential composting, again, this was really student driven. So our students provided funding. They wanted to be able to compost in residence halls. We placed 4-yard containers like you see there in our residence halls. I'll note that every compost collection point we must keep under lock and key or combination lock, because if you don't control the access, students think that that's just a place to throw their empty soda bottle, and they will. So control it. We provide everybody that gets the training access to the container, a caddy to collect their food waste in their room, and the liners to make sure it stays that everything stays clean through the process. We provide education. This is important. Contamination, contamination, contamination. That is the key. You must control contamination if you're going to compost. So My note to everybody is educate your community and make sure you have put in writing with your compost provider, service provider, what is and what is not acceptable, so that there is no room for miscommunication down the line. And the last thing that I will mention very briefly is we have an ongoing multi-year effort led by our sustainability committee to address single-use plastics on campus. It was an effort that started pre-COVID and is, I believe we're at the goal line now. Our committee has drafted a detailed proposal that is really focused on having the president of UTD sign the Post Landfill Action Network's Break Free from Plastic Campus Pledge. Would immediately eliminate non-essential single-use plastic, establish a task force with the stakeholders that need to be at the table to set goals, timelines, and strategies to eliminate the remaining single-use plastic that can't be immediately eliminated, establish procurement guidelines, and then ensure appropriate campus waste management and transition to reusables. In order to do that, we crafted a detailed proposal advocating for why we should do it, how we can do it, and the benefits for doing it. We created a slide deck, and then we took the show on the road to build consensus around that. We have 1,300 student signatures, a letter of support from student government, graduate student assembly, staff council, and academic senate, and a student government resolution. We're currently meeting with leadership right now to hopefully get this across the finish line. But with that, it's been a long and ongoing process. It takes a lot of thought to do that, but it takes central leadership and somebody willing to connect the dots for the stakeholders that need to be on board. With that, I believe I've covered all of the items that I wanted to share. I hope that you have found something useful from my presentation. And I'll hand it back to you, Lori.
Thank you so much, Gary. Oh, that was excellent, and I have so many questions, and I know that our recycling person has a lot of questions. So buckle up; it's going to get interesting at the end. But Richard, please tell us about what you've got going on at Rice.
Wonderful. And can you see the screen that I'm sharing?
Yes, you're good.
Wonderful. Well, hi, everyone. My name is Richard Johnson. I'm the Executive Director for Sustainability at Rice University. I'm really pleased to be with you today. I just want to briefly thank my wonderful colleagues at Dallas College and the Sustainability Office for inviting me to participate today. They hosted a great track summit recently, and it just seems like they provide some of the best environmental education programming in the state. So well done, Dallas College. And I'm particularly honored also to be featured alongside Gary Cocke, whose work in sustainability at UT Dallas I've admired for years now. And then, as you just saw today, I mean, he's just doing fantastic work with his team up there. So
Richard, this is Georgianne. I just want to say, don't worry about time if we need to go over. This is such an important topic that if we need to go over for your presentation or the Q&A, we will. So
thank you so much, Georgianne. I appreciate that. So our journey at Rice with respect to solid waste and recycling has, in some respects, been a bumpy one over the years. And our biggest successes have been in the area of construction and demolition waste recycling, which is a big deal, but I won't be getting into that in my presentation today. Instead, I wanted to focus on municipal solid waste and recycling, which are those streams of materials most familiar to us. It's our daily trash and recyclables. Just as context, here in Texas, we don't have the benefit of a robust set of state and local laws that require certain levels of performance on diverting materials from the waste stream to recycling or to compost. You know, in many of the places where we say, oh, they have a culture of recycling, chances are there are regulations that are helping to shape that culture. You know, for instance, we might say, oh, everyone I know in Seattle recycles. But I should point out it's actually a violation of city law to put recyclables and food scraps in the trash in Seattle. So when residents in Seattle compost and recycle, it's sort of akin to obeying the speed limit. They're supposed to do it. Without those rules and regulations in our cities and in our state of Texas, we don't have the same level of infrastructure that makes successful recycling or composting so much easier. And that's why it's well worth applauding the success stories that we have here in Texas, like at UT Dallas, because those those who have managed to do well are doing so because they're self-motivated and they go through considerable lengths without the same level of resources and expertise available to them that many of our out-of-state peers have. So the title of my presentation is intended to reflect the fact that we've struggled over the years with our solid waste and recycling efforts at Rice and arguably in the state of Texas. And so here at Rice, we've had to rethink them. But I'd like to share with you some of the insights and some of the efforts that we have going on right now. I will begin by sharing some of what we've been doing to rethink processes of how materials are handled inside of our buildings. And then we'll shift to outdoor processes, and then I'll say a few words about composting of food waste. But I just want to point out what Gary said earlier, we're over-servicing containers. That's true across the entire sort of flow of materials across campus, as you will see in a moment. So our journey over the last 3 years has indeed been heavily focused on process reinvention for how we handle solid waste and recycling. We realized that we needed to embark upon that journey when we finally asked what proved to be a really powerful question. How many hours per day was the average custodian devoting to emptying trash and recycling containers? I want you to think for a moment what you think that answer might be, and consider a typical 8-hour workday. So how many hours is the average custodian devoting to emptying just trash and recycling containers? And when we posed this question to our custodial director, he spent a week or two researching the work patterns of his staff. And what he found shocked both him and us. What our custodial director reported was that the typical Rice custodian was spending 3.5 hours per day emptying trash and recycling containers from offices. This did not include hallways, break rooms, or other public areas. This was just offices. So I was so surprised by the number that I started reaching out to other universities like Stanford, like UCLA. And sure enough, this number actually proved to be typical, which is just stunning. So the following will likely seem familiar to you. Each office here at Rice, perhaps where you are, typically had its own trash can and recycling bin. The custodian would enter each office, unlock the door if no one was there, would go through several repetitive motions, including pulling the trash bag, dumping it in the trash can on her custodial cart, putting a new trash liner back in the trash can, emptying the recycling bin into the container in her cart, then setting the recycling bin back down. And then when exiting the office, she'd have to lock the door again. And this process would be repeated over and over and over again. You have 3.5 hours per day. And so that led us to the next question. How can we make better use of each custodian's time? So we went on a benchmarking expedition with a number of universities to learn about their processes. And then we developed a plan that featured 2 key steps to transforming custodial services in each building in Rice. So the first step was actually inspired by our own housing department, as well as other universities, and that is to centralize trash and recycling services in each building. So this would mean that each faculty member and each staff member would be expected to bring their own trash and their own recycling containers from their offices to centralized collection points in each building, rather than having custodians go into every single office on every single workday. So we were already doing this in our dormitories and quite successfully, I might add. So it was basically having the faculty and staff catch up with what the students were doing already. And then part 2, or the second step, was to replace our regular desk side trash cans with these small containers known as trash buddies. And we eliminated the plastic liners by switching to the buddies. And we strongly encouraged anyone who had food waste or wet trash to dispose of it immediately in the centralized containers, rather than letting it sit in their offices in the trash buddies, where if you have food waste sitting in your office for any period of time, it's going to create an odor and attract pests. So that was a way of trying to reduce that issue as well. And when we started this process, we had not even considered the issue of the use of all the plastic liners for trash cans. So we asked our custodial director, how many trash liners was he buying per year? And how many did he think we could save with the switch? So here comes another one of those shocks. So we learned that we were buying, so FEMP is the Facilities Engineering Planning Department. We learned that we were buying 825,000 plastic liners for trash cans every year, which is a shocking number. And he estimated, our custodial director estimated that between 400,000 and 500,000 of those liners were for just desk side trash cans. So we could eliminate those altogether by switching to the Trash Buddy. So that made the sell even easier for us. So just to recap, with those changes in the indoor processes, we saved 3.5 hours per day per custodian on average, which we then directed to a different set of services, which I'll get to in a moment. We eliminated the need for about 500,000 plastic trash liners per year, and we engaged the faculty and staff in handling their own materials, much as they'd be expected to carry their materials to a trash can, bring them down to the edge of the curb at home, right? So we had just rolled this out to campus in the first quarter of 2020, and then COVID happened. And we had initially highlighted a group of additional services that custodians could provide with all the saved time, but it turned out that by necessity, they focused on COVID-related services like cleaning high-touch surfaces. And the fact that we had just enacted this process change made it a lot easier for the custodians to pivot to a COVID response mindset. They suddenly had the time to be able to do that. So our focus on process reinvention over the last couple of years has also focused on what happens outside the buildings. So in fact, I hired a couple of student interns about 6 or 7 years ago to review how we were handling trash and recyclables from the buildings to our compactors. And their conclusion after a summer's work was basically that we couldn't have possibly made it more complicated if we had tried. So we knew there were all kinds of opportunities for improvement. And what I want to share with you, though, are 2 steps that you might find particularly useful. And these tie into to some of the work that UT Dallas is doing. So the first step is the datafication of our outdoor trash and recycling bins, or in other words, embedding some intelligence into the humble infrastructure of the trash can. So why do this? Well, our grounds team was emptying outdoor bins every single day, regardless of their fill level. And this seemed like a lot of wasted effort, but we wanted to collect data to understand the issue in greater detail. And also we were interested in identifying our highest volume outdoor trash containers, as well as those that had such low volumes that we could potentially remove them due to lack of use. So what you're looking at here are 2 standard bins, one trash and the other recycling, that happen to have lids on them with sensors, and each bin is numbered too. You see, recycling bin is numbered 10, the trash bin numbered 64. So the sensors that are on the underside of those lids will tell us the fill level of each container. And the data then goes to the cloud and populates this dashboard. And you're looking at a map of our campus with all of the outdoor trash and recycling bins. And we've set a series of thresholds that you can see over on the right. Bins that are shown in green are less than 75% full. So that means they do not need to be picked up. And you'll see over on the left side of the screen, there's a bin that is 76% full, which means that it's time to pick up the contents. And note that that bin is on the periphery of our campus. It takes a lot of time actually to get over there and to empty that particular bin. So we only want to have to do it when it's absolutely necessary to go out there. We don't want unnecessary trips that far. But you'll also see that only a few bins, those that are highlighted in orange or in red, actually needed to be emptied. So the dashboard enables us to look into specific details of each bin. And so here we see 2 different containers that are full or even overflowing. The one on top has a fill level of 102%. So that means it is slightly overflowing. And you can also see the battery life for each of these bins as well. So, so we have a sense of knowing when there's a battery that is about to go bad. So this data set shows an aggregation of the bins by zone on our campus. And if you look at the column, let's see, average fill level at location. Here we see 41%, 39%, 45%. So what jumps out is that bags were being pulled when the bins were not even half full. And so this, in our view, was potentially wasted labor. And this is aggregated data across many different bins. And I'm going to drill down a little bit further here. So the sensors were installed in a series of waves, but all the bins have had sensors for at least 2 months, and some of them for as much as a year. And what we found was that 90% of the bins were being emptied well below their 75% threshold that we had established for pickup. So out of 183 outdoor receptacles, 166 on average were being emptied well before they should have. So that is wasted time, wasted effort. So the dashboard enables the grounds manager to filter the data so that he only sees the bins that need to be collected, and he can then deploy his employees to focus solely on these bins. And so now that's how the work is being dispatched. And then further, the dashboard has the ability to forecast. So I have set this to forecast for the next 3 days. And this tells us which bins will likely need to be collected during that time, so we could figure out, what labor, where labor is likely to be deployed, and how much labor will be needed going into the near future. So the dashboard also sends emails to alert of bins that need to be emptied. So it can also send text messages and all other kinds of reports that you will see here on the right. There's looks like almost 10 different reports. So the bins are communicating to the supervisor, who can deploy staff in the most efficient way possible. And this saves, of course, time, and it saves plastic liners too. So for those locations that prove over time to be high volume, we want to potentially convert them to a technology that we have in one location on campus from a company called Big Belly. And it's a compactor, a compacting trash can and a compacting recycling bin. So this is at our recreation center. And so if we have other locations where we're finding, we'll need to pull contents multiple times a day or something like that, then it would make sense to invest in this more expensive infrastructure. Conversely, for those bins that are consistently showing little use, we might actually remove those bins altogether, maybe redeploy them elsewhere, maybe not. Okay, so a second step that we took to reinvent the outdoor processes was essentially to datafy the path from the point of disposal at the indoor centralized trash container all the way to the trash compactor, which is picked up by Waste Management, same vendor as UT Dallas. And so we purchased a number of low-cost GPS tags, like what you see on this slide. So basically, we threw those tags away strategically. We placed the tags in a number of trash cans around the campus. And then we, as those bags moved across campus, we studied the routes that they took and the time that it took to move from point to point. And not surprisingly, we found a lot of inefficiencies in the routing of materials. And in particular, we found that sometimes our custodial or grounds teams were not taking materials to the nearest trash compactor, but rather were hauling materials all the way across campus. So we're making changes right now to shorten the routes and better utilize all of our existing infrastructure. So we have 4 trash compactors and recycling compactor on campus. And one of those compactors is getting pulled 3 or 4 times a week. Those other 3 compactors were getting pulled more like once a month. And we clearly could be better utilizing those other compactors. So the final story that I want to share with you relates to the handling of a single material type, which Gary also talked about, which is food waste. And we had struggled for years to find a way to compost our food waste. We didn't have the labor to haul food waste from each kitchen to a centralized point. There were no vendors willing to collect it from us. And our efforts to compost food waste directly on site with an in-vessel composter proved to be a lot of work. We had done that for several years up until about 2007 or 9 or something like that. And it was a fragile process too. So thankfully, in 2020, we developed a relationship with a startup in Houston called Moonshot, and they were able to bring their van to the loading dock of each kitchen to collect food waste in special bins. So it started with pre-consumer, and then in the summer of sort of August, September of 2021, we expanded to post-consumer, and they collect from not only from Rice, but from other sites around Houston, and then they bring all the materials up to a facility called Nature's Way Composting, which is located in the northern suburbs of Houston, up by the Woodlands, if you know our dear city. And Moonshot will then even bring finished compost back to Rice upon request, which is wonderful. So part of what excites me about Moonshot is their level of data. So they created a dashboard where we can see not only how much material was captured from Rice, but also specifically where it came from. So as of a few days ago, we had composted 291,931 pounds of food waste. And you'll see over on the right, the different dining halls represented here. We have a funny name of servery for our dining halls on campus, but that's just Rice speak for dining hall. And then you'll see 2 recent additions on the far right. We just added an offsite graduate apartment complex to the route, as well as one of our retail dining operations. And we intend to expand this further to another offsite graduate apartment complex and to add a few more retail dining operations for the campus as well. So before we get into questions, which will be just a moment, I'd like to just mention a few steps of what's coming up next. First, I'd like to rerun our GPS tag experiment that we use to track the trash. I want to track bags of recyclables across the campus. And I specifically want to make sure that they are ending up in the recycling compactor and not in the trash compactor. Second, we'd like to experiment with a smart indoor bin that uses a combination of artificial intelligence and robotics to automatically sort materials to either the waste or recycling streams. And so this would only be for truly high volume locations. And then third, as I just mentioned, we have some expansions in mind for our food waste composting. And then fourth, we want to start auditing the material stream itself and begin to pinpoint where we need to focus educational efforts to influence behavior and where we might need to intervene to divert particular material types. So this is a good time to jump to questions. Thank you so much for listening. And let me stop my screen share. Thank you.
Hi, thank you so much, Richard and Gary. That was an absolutely amazing presentation, and we have loads of questions for both of you. So I guess we'll just go back and forth. We'll stick to about 3 or 4 questions each. So let's start with Gary. So Gary, the first question comes from our very own Ted Spradley. He is a part of our sustainable facilities department. So Gary, did you have anything specific in your RFP that you felt was critical when your bid requests went out? Are you putting together, or sorry, we are putting together the RFP now, and we would love your advice.
Quick clarifying question. Are we talking about the RFP for the sensors, or are we talking about RFP for the waste contractor?
The waste contractor.
So we did make sure that we had the blue bags because that was just integral for our operations at the moment. Hopefully we can go on a path similar to rice and address the plastic bags. But at the moment, we need the blue plastic bags to make sure that we are keeping our recycling separate from our trash. We also made sure that we had agreement on what the contamination rates would be that would trigger any sort of penalties or fees. And then we made sure that we had in writing exactly what we need to have in stream collection. And so make sure that they attest to collecting and taking to market the items that that you're collecting, and make sure that you are able to verify that those items are indeed being collected and taken to market. I know that especially on the college campus, we have many students that are very interested to make sure that not only are the items getting into the recycle bin, but they're going from that recycle bin and truly being recycled. We added language to also require notification if there are market changes that require items to no longer go to recycling. We haven't had that come up yet, but we were going out to bid right about the time that the recycling markets were really being affected by the transitions within the industry.
Thank you so much. This is extremely helpful. Next question is for Richard. So how did you convince faculty and staff to empty their own cans? This is something I've seen this is something I've been considering for a long time, and we're curious on the best ways to apply that pressure.
So that's a good question. We started out just in the facilities department to convince ourselves that it was viable. And then we had a champion in the senior level of our administration, our VP of administration, who said, let's do it next in the primary administrative building, which is called the Allen Center. And he went around to every single office in the Allen Center and said, this is what we're doing. This is why we're doing it. And I appreciate your support and your feedback. And that helped as well. And then we basically we gave a heads up to the someone on the faculty senate, but we otherwise just rolled out an announcement to campus, and we were bracing ourselves for all sorts of uproar. And it was like maybe 3 or 4 grouchy emails, and that was about it. And then COVID happened, and so it kind of went under the radar after that, right? And plus, I mean, another thing that was sort of just a coincidence that worked out to our advantage. Not that I ever want to use COVID as something that works to your advantage, but suddenly faculty and staff didn't want custodians going into their offices, right? If you were going to be on campus during COVID, you didn't want to see anybody. And so, they were plenty fine to just handle their materials themselves. And then once everyone came back, oh, well, this is the way it's been, we handle our own materials. So I think in some level we got a little bit lucky just because of the circumstances. But it wasn't a big uproar or anything like that.
Thank you so much. And what a creative idea. And I know personally, I would love it. I find ways to, go get water, go to the bathroom every day anyway. You might as well grab your recycling can on the way. So yeah, I think it would work out well. Next question is for Gary. Can you tell me the pros and cons for organics versus turn?
So in my experience, a very good relationship with organics thus far, and they are able to collect our items. They are able to take meat and animal products and things like that that oftentimes people don't think of as compostable, but when you're doing it at scale, they can do that, as can Turn. They were very good partners in creating the educational materials, and they even partnered in training sessions with our campus. We are currently out of contract with them, and we are evaluating right now. And Turn is right now able to accept, to a moderate degree, some cardboard boxes, with pizza grease and things like that. So that they aren't appropriate to recycle. We don't want to send them to landfill, and without having compost as an option, then they would go to landfill. So Turn can accept those, and they can accept to a moderate degree, like kind of the compostable clamshell packaging as well. In Dallas-Fort Worth, it's hard to find a facility that will accept those items. And so as of right now, Turn is the provider in the DFW area that I have found that can accept those. And so we're likely to look real hard at their service. Beyond that, I'll say that both have they're both really valuable resources. They're both cost effective. I think that for our annual bill for what I've discussed, our compost operations is about $15,000 a year, and so it's much more attainable than a lot of people that it might be going in.
Thank you. Thank you. So let's go ahead and do one more question each. And the next question is for Richard. Have you had any issues with approaching the private food vendors like Little Bird? If so, how do you handle that?
So far, no issues at all. We don't have chains that are operating on our campus, like a McDonald's or Subway or something like that. It's more like when we have vendors from the outside, maybe they have one or two locations off campus somewhere. So it's a much less bureaucratic kind of relationship. We've tried to, when we approach them with things like this, we try to make it so that it's not, too cumbersome for them, right? And we try to understand where their pain points are. So it's not been an issue. If we had a big food court with sort of national chains and their own sort of supplies that they expect to use, it may have been more of a difficulty. So I'd be interested, how Gary might approach that. I suppose you all may have some national chains on campus.
Do, and that does add a challenge, especially that is a hurdle we're trying to clear right now with our single-use plastics effort. And so oftentimes that packaging is also the branding for those large national organizations. And so what we're hoping we're able to do in that context is prioritize single-use plastic contract requirements when we go out to bid for contract renewals. And with that, I'll put out the call. I'm actively in the market for universities that are ahead of us there so that we can learn from their experience in trying to incentivize national brands to leave the single-use plastics behind.
Thank you so much. And we had two people in our audience ask this next question, and we can end the session here. And you both can answer this, but did you have to purchase your own containers to mount the sensors, or was that an add-on service?
For UT Dallas, we lease most of our containers, and so we had to get permission. And I was pleasantly surprised to hear that we got that permission with no problem whatsoever from Waste Management, and they've been a good partner here. And so what we're going to need to do as we move forward is just to make sure that the data that we have for making our waste more efficient is something that we do in partnership and not something where we're necessarily serial with the way that we present the changes that we're going to see from the university standpoint.
The way we ended up where we are now with the sensors was kind of interesting. We had initially asked for a bunch of money to convert a lot of our outdoor trash recycling containers to the Big Belly containers, which have sensors in them, which are compacting. And initially that funding was approved. And then when COVID happened, that funding was withdrawn by the university as part of trying to gather up as many funds as possible for COVID response. And actually it was probably a good thing that we had that money taken away, because it allowed us, it gave us a moment to sort of rethink the strategy, which was, well, before we go to the expense of putting a Big Belly in place, let's see if there's a way that we can collect some data to determine whether that's truly a high volume location, as opposed to just kind of, walking up to a grounds person and saying, does this one get a lot of use? Oh, yeah, sort of. So we have outdoor containers by a company called Victor Stanley. And so we added, we went out and purchased the lids with sensors on them, which was a pretty cheap thing to do. And then just started deploying those lids with sensors. And that's going to then tell us whether we need to go the next step to buy the Big Bellies, or can we remove the outdoor trash and recycling container altogether. We sort of, over time we realized, we may have more outdoor trash recycling infrastructure than we need. And each one you put out there, someone's got to go out and collect from it. And it's not like we ever have an issue of people just randomly throwing their trash on our campus. So we're fortunate that if you've been to campus, the grounds are very nicely kept, and you wouldn't dream of littering on the campus. It would feel like a crime. Well, it is a crime, but it would just it feel like you were being a jerk if you were doing it. So so we ended up doing the Victor Stanley lids, and I think that was the right process. And it's going to help us streamline to get to the outdoor infrastructure that we actually need, and then we're going to right size it based on how much use that it gets.
If you don't mind, I'll tag on a little bit to what you're saying. And so I'm realizing, for one, I neglected to mention the brass tacks for our sensors that we've deployed. And so for the sensors that we've purchased for our 22 8-yard containers, the total bill comes in under $3,000. And so it's in the scheme of things, for an operational budget, a minimal investment with a tremendous ROI. And so I should have mentioned that for sure. And then I know the sensor provider that we're using, Sensineo, makes a sensor that you can put into existing containers on campus. And so I've spoken with our grounds department, is who's responsible for servicing those. And I haven't convinced them that it will add the utility that I think it will yet, but nonetheless, it's a solution that's out there. And so that would be neat. I would like to have that visibility so we can see our on-campus containers and our 8-yard containers all in one dashboard and toggle back and forth. I'm not sure if that's something that your campus, your sensor provider might be able to do as well. And then the last thing that I'll say, this was not a data-driven decision, but I do resonate with what you said, where we have removed many of our outdoor and recycling disposal locations, and we've left some that are really a bare necessity, Otherwise, the expectation is that students would take their waste inside the building and dispose of it since they're ultimately headed to a building. And we haven't observed that there's been any litter issues or anything from that. And so again, it just increased the efficiency of what we're doing.
And Faye, I'd like to add just one comment to what Gary just said. I think something that all of our campuses face right now is that we have a labor shortage. And from a grounds perspective, after several years of COVID, we're pretty far behind on grounds maintenance. And you know, for those of us down on the coast, if you add on top of that the impacts of fairly recent hurricanes and all of that, there's a lot of work to do. And to the extent that you can free up FTEs that you already have from picking up or from over serving containers, as Gary said, and redeploying those folks to actually work on grounds beautification is a wonderful thing, because and it's not like we're going to get budget to dramatically expand our staff. We have to make do with what we have, and it's hard to even fill the positions we have. So these sensors are really paying for themselves in so many different ways. It's really extraordinary.
Thank you so much to both of you. I wish we can keep going. There are more questions, but I think now is a good time to end it. And I've put to the audience, I've put both of their emails in the chat. Please feel free to copy those and send them your questions. And we will absolutely make sure to have both of you back, and so you can expand on all of this. Your work is just incredible, and thank you for sharing this with us as we begin our journey into this. So thank you both. Thank you to everyone for